This is John Gold, and I'm here with my friend Don. Don has been an activist over the years. He was heavily involved in the 9/11 Truth Movement at one time. He's an advocate for the people of Palestine. But his years in 9/11 activism have kind of waned. He's kind of stopped doing it. And I wanted to ask...
Sold out.
Yeah, you sold out. So, okay, what happened exactly that kind of pushed you away from the cause?
I don't know that any one thing happened that pushed me away from the cause. I think that there is ample opportunity to speak to people and inform them on a variety of issues, including 9/11. Still, I think that the general direction of a mass movement, so to speak, is not one that I usually subscribe to anyway, regardless of what the cause is. That's just not in my nature. And my general method and delivery and talking points aren't typically the same as the general mass movements anyway.
Right.
Things of, controlled demolitions or Pentagon and things of that nature just aren't things that I think are even necessary to speak to people on if your intent is to get them to kind of open up and look into a situation in a slightly different way. They've been bombarded with that information for the past decade. It's been marginalized and scrutinized, ridiculed and whatnot for the entire decade on a variety of alternative and mainstream outlets. So there are other ways to go about it rather than to keep repeating that same...
That's always been my problem, is I've always done my own thing.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's all everyone should do.
I tried to be supportive of, the controlled demolition advocates, and believe me, there are family members who still question how those buildings came down.
And that's fine to do that.
And as long as it's an important question to them, it's an important question to me. But as far as reaching a majority, I don't think it's the best way to do that.
I think if you look at the past, 13 years nearly of events, you look at 9/11 used as justification for a lot of things that have transpired, actions, laws, behaviors, some of those legal or illegal, the spying, for example.
Right.
You take all of that into consideration, you don't need to question how the buildings came down to question whether or not some people would use an event like this as a means of exploitation to further an agenda. And I think that's something that's been done throughout history. And I think that more and more as things are revealed and as time goes by, people become a little more desensitized to maybe the traumatic element of it and maybe a little more willing to perceive it, especially in a time where they're seeing lies, corruptions, cover-ups, and other scandals unfolding around them. It's not that great a leap, I think, to suggest that there are pieces of information that have been withheld from the public that might shine new light on the situation and maybe change how people perceive that situation and who might ultimately have some culpability.
So you know that we were lied to about 9/11, but your viewpoint is that it was essentially capitalized on?
I think we're lied to about a lot of things. I can't say with absolute certainty who did what, who knew what, when. I think there are some things you can piece together, and again, you're only playing with the information that's been provided to you. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. And there's also a lot of information that has been purposefully redacted or hidden in order to keep other information from coming to light or to keep momentum from gaining to promote releasing more information. So I think that absolutely anytime there's a crisis, it is absolutely exploited for the prosperity, the progress of an agenda that doesn't typically always suit those they are claiming to be defending.
Right.
And I think any time that happens with any event, I think people should take a step back and not just take what is spoon-fed to them by the mainstream media, but to look up alternate sources, look up the historical context of things, and really try to get a broader scope rather than just the 1 or 2 minute sound bites that you're afforded through most major outlets. And that's pretty much all you're supposed to think about a topic.
What are some of your problems with the official account of 9/11?
I think some of my issues are the limited scope of the investigation right from the beginning. It was pretty clear that they went in with kind of a, we know who did what, here's how kind of attitude. A lot of it was already kind of pre-outlined and predetermined ahead of time. Information was limited. There were conflicts of interest as to who had access to what information and who was the provider of that information. So I think just that is the starting point, and just some of the statements, like we had no idea, it was a total surprise, just things that really give it such a childish aspect when you think about the delivery of people who are supposed to be in charge with not only national security but the leadership of your country and your government, to put it in such blanket terms like that, and for people to be forced to swallow that and then be ridiculed or labeled negatively if you have anything to question about it. I think that is a dead giveaway that there is something more than meets the eye. And I think, again, the last 12 plus 13 plus years have shown that situations like this are capitalized upon even when not a lot of information is given to really, prove the case, completely. And that's why family members are still fighting to this day for the release of more information and for even another investigation, an independent one that they feel is truly independent.
One of the problems that we have today is that there really aren't that many family members who are as active as they used to be, and I can't blame them.
Oh, yeah.
If you're completely ignored, if every effort you make is completely ignored, it takes its toll.
Right.
And Patty Casaza said years ago, she's a Jersey girl, she said that each time she does this, she dies a little. It's very hard for them to do this. It's one of the reasons I keep on going, in their stead, to try and to do it for them. But
I think that's all individuals can do, is just continue to speak out when they can. You have to realize, unfortunately, a lot of times it ends up being preaching to the choir. There are a certain group of people who are willing to embrace questioning of official accounts or looking more into situations than most people. Some people love to live in that comfort, bliss. I wouldn't call it completely ignorant, but there's a bliss to it of not really going beyond what the status quo is and what you're told. This is the line and this is what it is. Well,
eventually you have to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to do something about it. And I think a lot of people shy away from certain things because they don't want to do anything about it, because they're comfortable in their lives.
There's only so much that people can do individually, and I think I've seen it over the past 13 years. I know there were times in the mid-early 2000s where any of this kind of dialogue with anybody outside of a small circle of friends would be inconceivable, but nowadays it's not that inconceivable, and I think that's just a matter of time. And just like anything, it takes time and effort, and no one person can really champion a cause and see it to fruition. It's impossible. Everybody can do what they can. Some will do more than others, but I can absolutely understand how disheartening it would be for the family members, especially, who have been trying and have been, faced with roadblock after roadblock at every turn. Eventually you have to say, hey, I have my life to live still in addition to this.
Yep.
There's only so much I can do. But I don't think that is an excuse to simply ignore the information that's out there and to simply stop pressing. I think it just means that others need to take that on and continue to push it.
Right.
I think we see that. I think there's a lot of younger folks that are more willing to listen to that. They have alternative sources. They're in tune with the internet and alternative media right from the get-go, where they aren't as indoctrinated, so to speak, by only trusting mainstream sources and whatever they see on their TV or their newspaper.
I think, if anything, one of the successes of the quote-unquote 9/11 truth movement is that it got people to start questioning what we were told.
Absolutely. About anything, like I said. Yeah.
About it, a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, all right, so Israel-Gaza, what do you have to say about that?
Israel-Gaza, that's a long, decades-long conflict. I think it's pretty obvious where our media bias and government bias lies. I would hope that people look beyond the talking points that are provided to them and do a little research. I'm a fan of, humanity and civility, and I don't think that warmongering on either side is really going to help the civilians who end up really being the victims and the casualties in all of this. I would also say that Americans, whether you'd like to believe it or not, or admit it or not, have a lot to do with the violence that's going on over there and are heavily an influencer. And I think that you know, if you have any kind of compassion or sense of humanity, you should reflect upon that and kind of try to look at how and why it's being done in your name. So,
with our American tax dollars,
absolutely,
with our ammunition and guns that we send them.
And with the full support of our Congress and, really, and every industry, and if you go against it, you're pretty much blacklisted. And I think that, you know, people should ask, you know, why is that? Why is that power there and that kind of belief that you have to unconditionally support, you know, Israel's right to defend itself? And what does that mean, to defend itself, when an occupying force takes over land that was occupied by a different group of people, and then they continue to expand out? What exactly is defensive about
right that? You're right. All right, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I just, you know, I wish people would care about things that matter and would talk about things that have more of an impact on humanity itself, rather than the minutia of, you know, celebrity comings and goings and entertainment industry rumors and whatever else is advertised to them. But I understand it's comfortable to be distracted, and I understand it's human nature to do what is habitual and comfortable. So I just hope that maybe in time we see newer generations emerge that have a greater consciousness. I think that's all we can hope for.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Don.